Hello there and welcome back. We're in the middle of studying about the responsibilities given to the church by Jesus Christ. As He has left the church here on earth to do His work at one point in time, He will snatch that church up, and we talked about the rapture. Following the rapture, there is a judgment that takes place. It is a judgment of accountability, a stewardship, an evaluation of the stewardship of the church. And so let's dig into the judgment seat of Christ. So I'm excited to be back and start working our way through this again. I missed all of you, and we're ready and excited to start putting all of this together again. So let's recap for just a second as to where we've been and bring you up to where we left off last November. It's been 2 months since we've talked about this. And so let's do a little recap. So all of this, what God has done, what God is doing, and what God will do is guided by the following desires of God. We said, triptych number 1, God desires that all men everywhere glorify God as they admire and adore Him as Father, trust Him as provider, obey and serve Him as King, and worship Him as God. That's how in that triptych, we went from paradise lost to paradise gained. That's how it started, it broke, and then God will fix it. So that was triptych number 1. Triptych number 2, God desires one nation, that nation being Israel, to lead the way. He chose Abraham. He made Abraham's descendants into a nation. They broke, and I believe God someday intends to fix it. Triptych number 3, we said God desires one heaven-sent king of Israel to rule them all. Christ was sent, Jesus was sent, He was born, He was rejected, crucified, resurrected, will return, and will rule. That was triptych number 3. Then triptych number 4, this king was rejected, this king died, this king was resurrected, this king went and ascended to heaven, and he left on earth the work of the church. The one church, the bride of the king, is making disciples of all nations. That fits in with that original desire. And that's the task of the church. Go and make disciples of all nations. So we've talked about the early church, the refined church, and the refined church was the 7 messages to the 7 churches in Revelations chapters 2 and 3, where Christ scrutinized and examined every church as to its spiritual condition and gave it instructions on how to fix, commended it in certain areas and gave it instructions on how to improve or fix areas that were lacking. But this early church, refined church, and then we talked about the raptured church. The work of the church will come to an end. And as we move towards the glorification of the church, at some point in time, there will be the instantaneous snatching away or snatching up of the church. That includes dead saints as well as living saints at the time. They will all be caught up to meet the Lord in the air and raptured, and that will end the work of the church. All of the saints at that point in time will be glorified. They will receive glorified bodies. Dead saints will be resurrected from the grave. souls reunited with bodies, but those bodies will be glorified bodies. All saints that are living at the time of the rapture will be instantaneously receive new bodies that are glorified, and just like Christ's body that he had after the resurrection. And so that was the raptured church. Then we were ready to start the Judgment Seat of Christ. So once that church is raptured or snatched up and we meet the Lord in the air, Thessalonians says, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. I believe that after that rapture and are now meeting the Lord, one of the first events to take place in our glorified state is the Judgment Seat of Christ, what is known as the Judgment Seat of Christ. At the Judgment Seat of Christ, we will all appear before what is known as the Bema Seat. I'm calling it the Judgment Seat. The Greek word is the word Bema. The Bema Seat of Christ, where we will be judged and purified. Now, the Bema was an athletic picture. It was what took place when the athletes were recognized for their achievements, and they would stand and be recognized for their achievements and given crowns, given wreaths. And so at the Olympics, those athletes that competed fairly and accurately and who won, who were recognized as achieving the most, were given recognition by the judges at the Bema Seat. And so these wreaths, these crowns, these prizes, these awards, that's where they were given out. So I want you to understand that at the Judgment Seat of Christ, the judgment is looking for and determining what is rewardable, what was run well, what was done well, what remains that is worthy of the actions of Christ, the glorification of Jesus Christ. So God is not judging sin, or Christ is not judging sin at the Bema Seat in the sense that sin was judged at the cross. But what Christ is looking for is what was done for his glory that's rewardable. The worthless, and here in this sense, maybe that's where the sins are recognized. The sins of the saints or the sins of the church are recognized from the standpoint that they're worthless and thrown out, can't be rewarded, can't be recognized as contributing anything to the glory of Christ. And so all of that is thrown out. It could have gained more. The efforts by the church could have gained more. But that opportunity was ruined. That opportunity was lost because of sin, and it's gone forever. But at the same time, what was done that is recognized at this judgment, what remains as rewardable is a spotless and glorified recognition of all that was good by the church body. And so this judgment evaluates stewardship of responsibility. So I do want to come back again to the message to the 7 churches. That evaluation by Jesus Christ while the churches were living was an evaluation of stewardship. How were they executing the plan? How were they executing their love for Jesus Christ? And there's a certain part of Revelations chapters 2 and 3 that has some rewards in the sense that Christ says, I am pleased with this or I'm pleased with that. But once the church work comes to an end and then we all stand before Christ at the Bema seat, now Christ does one final evaluation of our stewardship of responsibilities. How did we execute our responsibilities? Again, I stress, I don't believe that the judgment seat of Christ is about eternal destiny. It's all about recognizing what the church did that contributed to the glory of Christ, and that's rewardable. Now, there are 4 key New Testament passages about this particular judgment of the church. 4 key New Testament passages. The first one I'll read is found in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. Here's what Paul says. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the Bema seat, or the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. All right, that's the first set of verses. And you'll notice that the stewardship of responsibility given to Paul by Christ is emphasized in that phrase when he says, we make it our aim. We're shooting for a goal. Paul says we have something in mind we're trying to accomplish, and we want to shoot for that goal. Make it our aim that whether absent or present with Christ, we will be well-pleasing to him. He will be pleased with what we accomplished, with what we did. And then he also says each person receives an evaluation of where they fell as they reached for their aim, for their goal. There's the possibility of good. And I think that fits in with what Christ said when he told the one parable of the servant. It said to the servant, well done, good and faithful servant. So we receive in our body the things done in the body according to what we have done, whether good, well done, good and faithful servant, or bad. And that's where we fell short. That's where Christ is not pleased with what we did, what we accomplished. Somehow through sinful attitudes, sinful actions, we had the opportunity to glorify Christ, and we didn't. We failed. And there's no reward in that. It's not rewardable. It's just recognized as bad. Now, it doesn't say anything further in these verses. We're going to have to fill in more of the picture in some later verses. But the only thing I want you to take away from this verse for now are the 2 principles. There is a stewardship of responsibility that you have, and the aim is to be well-pleasing to him, and you're going to have to stand before him and hear whether you were well-pleasing, well done, good and faithful servant, or whether it was bad. We each have to give an account. each will hear something. Now, I recognize, I think there's the possibility, or it's very likely, that there's some good and bad. And these other verses are going to make that clear. There's things that are rewardable. There is some good, that it's not all necessarily bad. The whole point of a spirit-filled life is that we are making progress. We are getting the opportunity to do it right and trying to make progress. The second key set of verses is in Romans chapter 14, verses 10 through 12. Romans chapter 14, verses 10 through 12. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then, each of us shall give account of himself to God. So here, each member of the body of Christ must give an account of their stewardship. Nothing is said in this passage about what is received at this evaluation. No well done, good and faithful servant, or no bad per se. It's just you will stand before Christ and you will give an account. So why are you judging your brother, or why do you show contempt to your brother here on this earth? The judgment, or what will evaluate you and what will evaluate your brother, is Christ. That's not your job. That's Christ. And so you have this stewardship of giving an account of yourself to God. Now keep in mind, I think that this is referring to the judgment seat of Christ because of the use of the word brother and we. We shall all stand. Why do you judge your brother? It's talking about those who have a relationship with Christ, and these who have a relationship with Christ are the ones that have to give an account and stand before Christ. Any questions about Romans 14?
Also, we don't see rewards for unsaved.
Right. Yes, exactly.
It's talking about rewarding.
Yes.
And there can be no rewards for those who haven't put their trust in Christ.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
Even your good works are treated as filthy rags. I'm trying to think of the verse, but that's kind of what it is. So.
Very good. All right, the next passage is 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verses 5 through 15. 1 Corinthians 3, 5 through 15. Now this is our longest, most extended passage about the judgment seat of Christ. Paul says, "Who then is Paul, and who is Apollos, but ministers through whom you believed, as the Lord gave to each one? I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field. You are God's building. According to the grace of God which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But let each one take heed how he builds on it. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, the implication is the fire, the scrutiny of the fire. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. All right, so this extended passage pictures the responsibility that you and I have in serving Christ, pictures it like farming or a field or like a carpenter building a building. So Christ represents the foundation. The construction materials used reflect the choices of the builder. Those who are doing the building, they choose what kind of construction materials to use. Each contributor of the building process has his workmanship tested by a fire, which is this judgment seat, this bema seat, I believe. And that fire then tests the entire building. And he says, the day, and I think that day is referring to the judgment seat of Christ, the day will declare it because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. What survives the scrutiny of the fire is rewarded. That's stated twice. It's stated in verse 8, each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. And the other one is found in verse 14. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. So that what's rewardable, recognized as rewardable, is stated twice. But then notice we are in it together. We're all trying to build on the same foundation. While each man's individual work is what's judged, there is also a sense in which we collectively are building a structure, and each individual part is also part of a whole. And so he says here, now he who plants and he who waters are one, but each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. What doesn't survive the scrutiny, that's lost. It's gone. It's not rewardable. It perishes. It's gone. But the fact that that is gone doesn't affect the individual's salvation or his continued existence. It says, if anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. So I think that each one of us who go through this experience, there will be a sense of sadness, I think, at lost opportunities, what could have been, but nothing about that somehow condemns us to an eternal separation from Christ. That lost opportunities are burned up, but there's also all that was done for the glory of Christ that was rewardable, and that's cause for great rejoicing and the receiving of crowns for what was achieved. All right. Any questions about 1 Corinthians 3?
What would be a good description of the works that are rewarded? Like we all kind of know it, but what would be like just a nice description of it?
Yeah. So if you come back to, I'll come back initially to the illustration by Paul, where he says, "Who then is Paul? Who's Apollos? But ministers through whom you believed. As the Lord gave to each one, I planted, Apollos watered." So the act of planting seeds of the gospel are rewardable, I think. And the act of watering the seeds is rewardable. So let's just...
Doing as the Lord gave to each one, I guess, really doing what the Lord has asked you to do.
Yeah. Whatever it is the Lord asks you to do and doing it, yeah. But so if we just put it in terms of let's say Tom and I, let's say that Tom plants the seed of the gospel to someone that he's driving, and he talks about Christ and introduces him to Christ, but somehow I might come along and meet that same person and get them into a Bible study there in my home, and I'm trying to explain the gospel through a Bible study or teaching. That might be planting, watering. We both would be rewarded, even though I might be the one that has the opportunity or the joy of leading that person to Christ, but yet Tom planted the initial seeds of the gospel message that they started thinking about. Make sense? I think another practical illustration that I would throw out there that again, I think there's a danger if we get into too much specifics that I say something and that really isn't the way it pans out. But I'll take a chance or I'll take a risk and give this as an example. And if I'm wrong, the Lord is the judge, the righteous judge. But you all are very aware that I couldn't make the Adam service, the Christmas Adam service. I was here. I was in the building trying to get ready for that, and was in enough pain that I couldn't function, couldn't concentrate well enough to have done anything. And God sent an angel from heaven as I was trying to make the decision of driving myself to the hospital. This little voice in Pam White was over here. "You're not driving yourself to the hospital. Get in the car. We'll watch Donna. We'll have somebody sit with Donna." She just took over and got us to the hospital and took care of Donna afterwards, took her home and got her in bed. And, she was just on the spot, willing to do something to serve out of love for Donna and myself. Might be rewardable. Just doing what Pam thought she needed to do because of love of Christ. Make sense? The last verse I want to look at is 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verses 24 through 27. This is the fourth passage that speaks of this event, I believe. "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now, they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 27. Here, the stewardship principle is pictured as an athletic contest. And just as there's the responsibility of the athlete to discipline himself and to keep himself under control and play by the rules, there are also umpires and referees that make sure the game is played according to the rules. If you don't play according to the rules, you don't get rewarded. It's a foul, so to speak. You're set back 15 yards. All right? But stewardship here is pictured in this athletic contest. We are to exercise discipline, self-control, perseverance. We are to play by the rules. We are to stay laser-focused. And the evaluation after the race leads to standing on the podium and receiving rewards, receiving crowns. And Paul says, though, that this isn't just a wreath that eventually withers and the branches dry up and become brittle, and the wreath, the old-fashioned wreath that they might have given on the podium in the Olympic Games, would eventually fade away. But what's received from Christ is imperishable, and for all of eternity is recognized for the crown jewel that it is in our striving to please him and do what is right. Now, we've already implied this, but just to state it again clearly, I believe the judgment seat of Christ is different than the great white throne judgment read about in Revelation chapter 20, I think it is. The great white throne judgment and the judgment seat of Christ focus on two different things. The focus of the judgment seat of Christ is finding what's rewardable, and as was just pointed out a little bit earlier accurately, at the great white throne judgment, all of our works, there's nothing rewardable. In our flesh, nothing is rewardable. And at the great white throne judgment, there's a focus on living and dying. There's, the penalty is eternal loss. And there is, what's at stake is life and death. And again, at the judgment seat of Christ, we're not talking about life and death. We're talking about glorifying Christ, glorifying the church, pulling out all the crown jewels of the selfless acts of service by the church. No books, nor the book of life is said to be present at the judgment seat of Christ. There's no mention of eternal loss at the judgment seat of Christ. The only thing that is eternally gone and lost are the bad works, the straw, the hay. And specifically, Paul says about the judgment seat of Christ that even though those bad works perish and are lost, yet we are saved, yet so as by fire. And so that brings us to the next step, the next destination on our triptych. And it's a phrase found in Revelation chapter 19, the bride has made herself ready. The bride has made herself ready. And I believe that that is connected to the judgment seat of Christ in the sense that when this evaluation of stewardship is complete, now the church stands before Christ without spot, without wrinkle, and glorified and perfected in every way, because there's now no wasted activities, no worthless activities. They have no recognition of contributing anything to the glory of the bride of Christ. All of that is burned up,
No part of it is allowed any recognition of contributing anything to the glory of the bride of Christ. And in the end, after this judgment process and all the crowns are given, in the end, the church will radiate and sparkle with all the recognized achievements of pure service for Christ. Everything good that was done by the saints. And the bride has made herself ready. Let's quickly just jump to Revelation chapter 19. Read that phrase. This is where we'll pick it up next time. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. There we go. His wife has made herself ready. The marriage of the Lamb has come. All right? That's where we'll pick up next time. Thank you. Back in the saddle again. Have a great day.
All right, well, that is a study on the Judgment Seat of Christ, and we're ready to begin next week, the marriage supper of the Lamb. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.